The Wine Spectator recently came out with its list of top 100 wines for 2023. In my last video, I identified what I thought were the 8 best buys from that list, but after giving it some thought, it occurred to me that there were a number of mistakes in that list, some glaring omissions, as well as some wines that were on that list that probably should not have been included. And in fact, while that Wine Spectator list was supposed to be a list of the most exciting wines of the past year, I found many of the selections to be quite boring. So in this video, we're going to fix their list by identifying 10 wines that should have been included in the Wine Spectator Top 100 Wines of 2023, but were not. Despite the fact that the 2020 vintage in Bordeaux was outstanding and there were lots of exceptional wines from that vintage, the Wine Spectator included only 4 Bordeaux in its Top 100 list, so you know we have to fix that. Be sure to stick around until the end because I'm going to be identifying my strongest Bordeaux recommendation at the end. But this first wine is also very deserving of a place in the Wine Spectator Top 100 this year. I'm talking about the 2020 Chteau Gloria. This wine sells for less than $50 and received a 93-point score from Wine Spectator. This wine received a number of impressive scores from other well-known critics as well. But rather than choosing this outstanding wine for its top 100, Wine Spectator instead chose a Bordeaux blend, not from Bordeaux, but from Napa Valley and from its challenging 2020 vintage. Curiously, the Wine Spectator gave that wine a 92-point score, so a lower score than it gave Chteau Gloria. And worse yet, that wine sells for $225 rather than this wine, which sells for less than $50. So that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Chteau Gloria is a blend from Bordeaux's left bank in Saint-Julien. It usually includes about 50% Cabernet Sauvignon, 1/3 Merlot, and there's also some Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc included most vintages. This is a wine that's quite elegant and can be enjoyed a few years after release, but it's also capable of aging quite well also. While Chteau Gloria is not a classified growth Bordeaux producer, that's largely because it did not exist at the time of the 1855 classification of Bordeaux. Certainly, in strong vintages in particular, it's quite capable of making wines that rival the quality of classified growths, such as this outstanding example from 2020. In my view, the Wine Spectator also made a big mistake by failing to include a wine from a legendary producer in the Loire Valley that it gave an impressive 97 points and which sells for only around $79, so certainly an outstanding quality-to-price ratio for that wine. This is a 2020 Chenin Blanc from Vouvray in the Loire Valley from Domaine Huet. Better still, this wine comes from one of the top 2 vineyards in all of Vouvray. It's an extremely impressive wine that's produced from biodynamically grown fruit. It's definitely one of the most exciting wines from last year that I'm aware of, and one that definitely should have been included in the Wine Spectator Top 100 Wines for 2023. 2018 was a simply outstanding vintage in Margaret River, Australia. Many believe it was the best vintage in the modern history of that region, which began back in 1967. Of course, Leeuwin is one of the top producers in Margaret River, and the 2018 Leeuwin Estate Art Series Cabernet Sauvignon received an impressive 93-point score from Wine Spectator, and it did even better with many other well-known critics. Yet this wine sells for only around $60 per bottle. This Cabernet Sauvignon also has around 3% Malbec included. This is a wine that has impressive structure and is definitely capable of aging for many years as well. But rather than including this wine in the top 100 list this year, Wine Spectator instead chose a Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon that also scored 93 points, but which sells for more than $200 per bottle, or more than $140 per bottle more than this impressive wine from Margaret River, Australia. One wine from California that I think should have been included in the Wine Spectator Top 100 this year is the 2021 Sagacio Old Vine Zinfandel. This impressive wine received a 94-point score from Wine Spectator and sells for right around $35 per bottle. This is one of the most impressive red Zin producers in California. It was founded way back in 1895 and has 300 acres of estate vineyards located all over Sonoma, For those of you who have never tried red Zinfandel, this is nothing at all like the cheap $3 to $5 white Zinfandel you may have heard about or tasted when you were younger. Rather, this is a very serious red wine that comes from one of the top red Zinfandel producers in California and from some historic old vine plantings. If you haven't tried it yet, it's a very fruity and spicy wine with brambly fruit and berries. It's got a little bit higher alcohol percentage, but it's certainly well balanced as well. It's one of my absolute favorite pairings with barbecue, and it's definitely a wine that you can enjoy right away. Wine Spectator did include a nice Zinfandel on its list at number 50. That wine sells for about $24 and received a 91-point score. But for spending about $10 more, you can get this wine, which is in the mid-90s, and certainly a level up in my view. In fact, one high-level criticism I have of the Wine Spectator list this year is that there's way too many wines that sell for about $20 and which barely receive 90-point scores. While it's certainly good to include some of those on the list, it should not be at the expense of wines with more character and which received scores that are in the mid-90s and sell for just a little bit more. Of course, it's no secret that in my view, one of the very biggest mistakes made by Wine Spectator was awarding Wine of the Year recognition to the Argiano Brunello di Montalcino. To be sure, that wine is nice enough as a cellar defender, but in my view, it lacks the gravitas to be Wine of the Year, coming from a relatively weak 2018 vintage for Brunello. But there was another Sangiovese from a top producer that received a 94-point score from Wine Spectator and sells for half the price of the Argiano, or only $45 per bottle. Yet this wine was nowhere to be found on the Wine Spectator Top 100 for 2023. I'm talking about the 2019 Castello Volpaia Chianti Classico Reserva. Volpaia has 45 hectares of vineyards in Chianti Classico. These vineyards are planted at 400 meters above sea level and feature the famous Galestro soils. These conditions help to produce Sangiovese that is elegant and refined, such as this outstanding 2019 Chianti Classico Reserva. In addition to considering Volpaia's wines, you'll definitely want to think about visiting Volpaia the next time you're in Tuscany. The scenery surrounding Volpaia is simply stunning. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. Wines that receive very high scores relative to their price often tend to do well and appear throughout the Wine Spectator Top 100 list. And yet there's an excellent Australian Shiraz that received 94 points from Wine Spectator and which sells for as little as $32 per bottle, yet this wine did not make the Top 100 list this year, namely the 2021 John Duval Entity Shiraz. This stellar Shiraz from South Australia is an excellent cellar defender. This is so because while it's designed to be approachable and enjoyable in its youth, and you don't need to wait to open it, it's also capable of aging effortlessly for up to 15 years or so. So it gives you tremendous flexibility in your cellar. New Zealand is a world-class producer of wines from many different grapes, not just Sauvignon Blanc, but also grapes such as Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and many more. Yet rather than selecting wines that would highlight this diversity and showcase New Zealand wines, Wine Spectator instead chose to quadruple down on Marlborough New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and it had included 4 such wines in its top 30. At best, this is cumulative. However, I also doubt that out of the tens of thousands of wines that were released last year, that a Sauvignon Blanc from actress Sarah Jessica Parker was one of the 30 most exciting wines of the year. Instead, I would have recognized the outstanding Escarpment Pinot Noir, which is from Martinborough. This is a top Pinot Noir that sells for around $48 per bottle and received a 94-point score from Wine Spectator. This is a wine that's inspired by Burgundy, yet which still faithfully expresses Martinborough's unique terroir. This wine sells for half the price of an even more highly acclaimed single vineyard Pinot Noir from Escarpment. This is a wine you can enjoy immediately with a decant, but which will also age for up to a decade in your cellar with no problem at all. Notwithstanding the prevalence of $20 bottles on this year's Wine Spectator Top 100, one $20 bottle that they ignored was an exciting red Rioja that received 93 to 94 point scores from many top critics, namely the 2020 Palacios Romando Finca La Montesa Rioja Crianza. This exciting red wine is a dominant Garnacha blend that also includes a little bit of Tempranillo. The producer has been pushing the price of this wine up in recent years to try to get it more in line with its quality. So this is definitely one to consider stocking up on while you can still get it around this price. They make a lot of it, around 670,000 bottles or so, so you should be able to find this one with no difficulty. I've become a big fan of Italian white wines, and in my view, a big oversight from the 2023 Wine Spectator Top 100 list is the failure to include the 2020 NAPA Vigneti di Foscarino Soave Classico. This is an impressive white wine that received 95 point scores from a couple well-known critics, yet which sells for only around $25 to $30 per bottle. This wine is made from the Garganega grape, and it comes from the Veneto region in Italy. This wine is bone dry with refreshing acidity. It's a wine that I often consider ordering at Italian restaurants with seafood or some of the starter courses, and which also makes an excellent candidate for your cellar. The wine that I think was the absolute biggest omission from the Wine Spectator Top 100 list of 2023 is a wine that many people don't know about yet. Of course, my viewers know about it, as I've mentioned it previously, and everyone who has purchased this wine has written me telling about how much they enjoy it, and they've absolutely raved about this wine. This is a wine that comes from the outstanding 2020 vintage in Bordeaux. It's a right bank Bordeaux from the Pomerol appellation. Of course, Pomerol can be exceptionally expensive, but this amazing wine sells for only around $80 per bottle. Nevertheless, it receives scores in the 96 to 98 point range from top critics who review Bordeaux. 2020 is probably the very best vintage of this wine that has been produced to date, although the 2015 through 2020 vintages are all outstanding and well worth considering. This is a very small producer that has only around 7 hectares of vines. The wines it makes are generally around 90% Merlot and 10% Cabernet Franc. I'm talking about the 2020 Fétis Clénet. So definitely do yourself a favor and consider stocking up on this wine. You'll definitely be glad that you did.